by just going through, what do we mean by creative data collection tools, why you might want to use them, benefits and limitations, how to use creative data collection methods, and what different methods are out there. And then I'll hand you over to Emma and to Sam to talk about SELFA. And yeah, just feel free at any time to ask any questions, leave comments. And as I mentioned before, if you've got any, creative data collection tools that you're using at the moment, please share them in the chat function and we'll collate them. So first of all, when I talk about creative data collection tools, what I really mean is sort of in contrast to traditional methods or more formal methods, such as surveys or interviews or focus groups. And there are really two ways in which data collection tools can be created. So either you're using traditional methods and you adapt them to suit your needs and to suit the needs of your participants. So for example, you could, in an interview, you could use some visual means to steer a conversation, or the tools in themselves could be creative. Maybe because that reflects you as an organization, or if you're a creative arts organization. Why use creative data collection tools? First of all, they're often less formal and time consuming, and it's at the core of it is really that instead of you asking questions, the participants may be asked to document their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences, so they have more ownership of the whole process and more authorship of the data that is being collected. And as part of that, they can also become partners in that whole process. So it's a much more equal footing in terms of the whole process. It's a much more participatory approach. And there can be a real sort of transfer of power to the participants because they're so heavily involved in the process and have got a much louder voice. And they can become much more independent as well and less restricted by specific criteria that maybe a more formal interview situation brings, or a survey. And they can also just be experienced as fun because they are less formal. They bring out the creativity in people themselves. If they're used in a really engaging way, people can almost forget that you're collecting data from them, because there's a lot of self-reflection that's built into a lot of these tools, and also they help to address barriers that prevent users from participating. And I think that's why a lot of organizations are looking more for creative data collection methods. So for example, if in the case of SELFA you're working with children and young people, then a formal interview obviously is not going to work. Or if you're working with people whose first language isn't English, or people with learning disabilities. So there might be different barriers that they would then face if you were to use more traditional methods. So just an overview of benefits and limitations. I've already mentioned quite a few of the benefits. In terms of the limitations, I mean, any kind of data collection method has its inherent limitations, and that's no different with creative tools. One of the ones is that you're really only gaining a partial perspective, because creative data collection tools really ask people to choose how to represent themselves. So and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just being aware that there might be a positive bias, that they're obviously choosing to represent a certain part of themselves. It can be difficult to interpret visual or other representations. Basically, creative data collection tools, from the user's point of view, you bring in your own experience, your lived experience, your own personality, your individuality, and you bring in your own meaning. So if I then look at, for example, a photo that somebody has taken, I need to understand more deeply, why they chose to take that photo and what kind of meaning it has for them. So often what's useful if you can use, these kinds of tools to elicit a conversation about, the meaning and why they chose, certain visual representations. Aggregating data is difficult. You're not sending out a survey to hundreds or thousands of people where people answer the same questions or give similar answers. but you know, if that's your aim, then creative data collection tools are probably not the best tool to use generally, just because it is, you know, you end up with lots of really in-depth data, but it's very personalized and individual, and it's difficult to conduct at scale. You know, again, it's not like you're sending out a survey. You know, these are sort of tools that you use one-to-one or in small group settings, so it's more difficult to use on a larger scale. So how to use creative methods. The number one thing really to bear in mind is, or to figure out, is what is it that you want to know? You know, what data do you want to collect? And that really determines your goals. And what Antonia and I've found really is that that's where theory of change comes in, and that will help you with that. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept of a theory of change. We've got, I think, some recordings of learning labs on our YouTube channel about theories of change. And if you're interested, get in touch and we can share more resources with you. But generally, a theory of change is a process for thinking about a program or a project or an organization as a whole. So there is a statement, usually in a visual form, so you know, in the shape of a matrix or a flow chart, of what you want to happen, what kind of change you want to bring about. So it's really about your intentions and your hopes, and it focuses on the essence of your thinking. So it's really about focusing on thinking about and describing the link between your activities, your outputs, your outcomes, and your impact. So there's a link of causality rather than it just seeming like you know, a chain of unlinked events or coincidence. So once you've figured out what it is that you want to know, you then think about, well, what makes you want to use creative methods, especially if it's, you know, to address particular barriers for your participants. It's then thinking about, you know, the particular needs of your participants, the context that you're working in with them, and identifying appropriate tools. I think I've already alluded to it, but where possible, combine more traditional methods with creative methods. So, for example, if you're asking somebody to keep a photo diary, you know, it's about figuring out, well, why did they choose these photos? Why did they, you know, not choose something else, for example? And but often the photos kind of lead to that conversation that people might otherwise struggle to articulate. So they're really powerful tool. And then lastly, you know, always think about ethics, confidentiality, and data protection. I think with everything that we do as, you know, as charities, we always try to, you know, obviously not do any harm as a result of what we do. And it's the same with any kind of data collection or evaluation. You know, could you, for example, ask, you know, questions that could cause somebody a strong emotional response that they would struggle to deal with. Obviously, confidentiality is a big point, making sure that you know, people feel they can be open because their responses remain confidential. You know, that they've been given the opportunity to give their informed consent, so that, you know, they've had information up front about what the activities are, what you're looking to, you know, to find out, how you're using the data, so that they're just clear about that and they can make an informed decision to be involved. And then data protection, obviously, is you know, is key. And I think with some creative data collection tools, there might be other considerations to take note of. So, for example, if you're asking people to keep photo diaries, are they taking photos of other people, and do they have consent from those people to, you know, to take a photo of them? So those are just some considerations to bear in mind depending on what method you use. So now I'm just going to run you through some different tools, and I'll start with visual methods. They can be really helpful in drawing out perspectives and feelings that people would otherwise struggle to articulate through words. So they can capture events in a person's life and also help illustrate change over time. So the number one tool here is photography. So that's either taking photos or choosing pictures. So in terms of taking pictures, you could ask you know, users or participants to keep a visual diary. So you ask them to record their lives or experiences through photos. And I think, you know, with most people now having access to a mobile phone that has a decent camera, that's become much easier. So people can take photos and then share, select a few that they want to share with you to tell their story. If you're interested in that kind of approach, there is a link to an organization called Photo Voice, and they use photo diaries, sort of for case studies, and for storytelling approaches. So have a look on their website if that's of interest to you. Then the second form of using photography is choosing pictures. So in that case, you would invite people to choose an image in response to a specific question or idea. So you would ask them a question and then ask them to choose an image that comes closest to how they feel about a certain subject, or that comes closest to their experience. So, it can really sort of become a prompt in that kind of discussion. Why did they choose that specific image? And again, there's a resource from Evaluation Support Scotland with a worksheet and some templates to describe that activity in more detail. I generally highly recommend Evaluation Support Scotland's website. They've got tons of really practical resources, templates, not just for creative data collection tools, but generally for evaluation and research methods. So do have a look on their website. Then art is another form of sort of visual method, and that can really be using any kind of medium. But the idea is to get participants to reflect on their life experiences or their outlook on their future, create something that expresses themselves, or something that's connected to the research that you're doing. And you can ask them to do drawings, self-portrait drawings, clay sculptures, collages, drama, theatre. I mean, the image that I'm using here, you could, for example, if you're working with young people, you could ask them to, have a photo of themselves and incorporate that into a collage that, describes how, for example, they see their future and or how they see themselves right now, for example. And again, there's a link at the bottom to a blog that describes visual methods that use art in more detail. And then there are various different mapping tools on network diagrams, and again, all of these have links, and it's not an exhaustive list. There's probably loads more, but just to give you an idea of some different tools. So the first one is a service use map, which is designed to find out how people interact with their environment or local services. So, for example, what kind of shops do they go to? Do they access leisure facilities? So, for example, if you were running a healthy living program, you could ask people before they start on the program, how they access services locally, and then again afterwards to, for example, see, are they making less use of takeaways? Are they going more to the supermarket because they're cooking more for themselves? Those sorts of things. So those are really easy way to do before and after comparison. Similarly with relationship maps, you can do it before and after comparison. So this is usually you'll see it when you follow that link, but this is usually sort of a drawing of a target with the individual in the middle, and then you would ask them to map sort of the connections that they have, the family, friendship connections that they have, and how far or how close they feel they are to them on that target. And again, you can do that before and after. I think especially if you're working with people on well-being programs or to reduce isolation, it's a really good way of figuring out before and after. Do they have closer relationships? Do they have a wider network of people who they're in touch with? Then emotional touch points is a tool to evaluate how people are experiencing the services that you offer. So you would, for example, sit down with them and ask them to draw sort of a map of or flow diagram of touch points that they had with your organization as seen by them, and that is then a really good sort of pathway into finding out at specific points how did they feel about the service, what changed for them, and that's a really good sort of segue into collecting stories and case studies. And then body mapping is another exercise, which it's literally a template drawing of a body, and then that can you can use that to facilitate discussions about people's perceptions or attitudes, for example, towards lifestyle changes, how they see themselves, any kind of medical conditions that they're dealing with, and how they feel about that. And again, you can do before and after comparison. Then in terms of interactive verbal feedback, again, there are different tools that work particularly well in smaller groups. One is the sticky wall, which I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I know Emma and Sam are going to refer to that in their presentation, but it's basically a way of collecting qualitative data, for example, at an event or at the end of a workshop, or a lesson, for example, by asking people to write their thoughts and ideas on sticky notes. And the really powerful thing about this is that everybody in the room can then see everybody else's answers and gets an idea of how did everybody else feel, what ideas do other people have. And again, there's a link to Evaluation Support Scotland with more information about this specific exercise. Then there's a stop, start, continue exercise. So basically at the end of a session, you could ask participants, as a result of having, completed a program or received, the kind of support, what are they going to stop doing? What are they going to start doing? And what are they going to continue doing? And again, I think Emma and Sam are going to talk about something similar. What could be really powerful here as well is if you get them to write it down on postcards, which gives you the data that you're looking for, but you also then have the opportunity to potentially post it back to them or take a photo and email it to them, a couple of months down the line, and saying, okay, this is what you said you took away from, from the program. How's that worked? Have you stuck to that? Have you had any, what kind of progress have you made? And then in terms of capturing ideas within groups, there are different visual means that you can use. So for example, if you were to do a focus group, which is a more traditional means of data collection, you could build in more visual means to keep people engaged, and also to make it easier for them to articulate certain ideas. So you could, for example, either use an idea thermometer or a target or a web to sort of figure out how good do people find certain ideas? Because sometimes I think it's hard for people to articulate why is a certain idea or how much better is an idea over another. But if they can sort of just move sticky notes around, it becomes much easier to sort of stimulate the thinking and articulate ideas. And then the last one I wanted to touch upon is storytelling, which I think is a really powerful mode of expression that just helps people reflect, sort of making sense of the past, whether that's, the last couple of months or a year, and also understand possible futures. So it's about reflecting how what have I achieved over the last year? Where am I right now? And what could that mean for the future? What do I want to happen in future? How do I want my journey to continue? And storytelling is really can be really useful if you're struggling to sort of delineate what has somebody experienced in terms of change as a result of something that we've done, and where are other factors that are coming in that we're just not aware of, or we don't know what impact they've had. So storytelling can really sort of help you focus somebody on, okay, what have you achieved as a result of our support, and what else happened in your life at the same time that may have had an influence on that. So generally, diaries or creative writing are a really good way of collecting that kind of data. So you could ask people to keep a written diary, or do an audio recording or a video recording that they can share with you. And it just gives you that longer term insight into lived experience, and just more regular, rather than just one snapshot of of a particular moment. And it also helps to change the researcher participant power dynamic, as I mentioned before, because people choose what they want to write down, what they want to share with you, what they've what was important for them on that particular day when they did the recording. The number one thing to bear in mind is that you have to provide quite clear guidelines. So you need to, make sure people understand what you're interested in. So they're not just recording anything that's happening in their life, but it's a bit more targeted on a specific subject that you're interested in. What will you use the data for? How often do you want them to write or to record a diary? How much of it? So do you just want like half a page of text, maybe just a couple of bullet points? Do you want a minute of recording? And the length of time covered. So are you just looking for a few weeks? Are you looking for a couple of months? So just be very clear on that so people know what you're expecting from them, and so they can, you know, work with that. And then also you've got other creative writing you know, tools, you know, for example, poems, if that sort of fits with the style of your organization. And again, there's a link to a blog from Quercus about qualitative participant diaries that might be useful. And the last technique I wanted to talk about is most significant change. So this is used in international development circles and has been used in those circles for quite some time. And the idea is, because it's often called monitoring without indicators, the idea is really that you don't employ quantitative indicators that you've already developed in advance. So really, the people who tell their stories, so the storytellers, they decide on what is the most significant impact for them. And that, you know, what makes that technique so powerful is that often those are changes that are completely hidden from you, because, you know, you don't have access to that lived experience. You know, you're not maybe in that particular area that, you know, the person lives in, so you just don't have access to that. So it's a really good method for measuring change that is intangible or fuzzy, or understanding how change happens generally. So it's really focused on the sort of the richness of lived experience, and also looks at the longitudinal experience. So you know, people might compare the situation that they find now to, you know, previously, you know, when before your programs, for example, started. And the case study of an organization that uses this approach really successfully is Arts at the Old Fire Station. So they're a creative charity that is based in Oxford, and I think for the last 5 years they've used they use quantitative data collection tools, but the storytelling approach is really at the core of all of their evaluation work. And you've got a link here to a handbook that they've developed, which outlines that methodology in quite some detail. But basically, in all the conversations with storytellers that they have, they're focused on these 4 questions. So what did they do in relation to the projects? What kind of activities did they take part in? What changed for them? Why was that change important? And what were the main things about their experience that made this change happen? So if you're interested in that kind of methodology, I really recommend having a look at that handbook. And then just a few other methods that I don't want to go into too much detail here, because either they didn't fit into one of the other categories or they're quite specialist. But especially if you're working with users with visual impairments, then tactile feedback might be a really good tool for you to employ, which uses textures to represent how someone feels. There's also a tool called an evaluation ladder, which again is a visual measure, where people can use to articulate where they feel they're in their journey. And then there's, if you're doing, obviously a lot of us are working purely online at the moment still, if you're running workshops online, there are various tools that you can use to have more interactive data collection while you're running those activities. So for example, Mentimeter has sort of the digital equivalent of a sticky wall, so where people can see everybody's comments and you know, sort of react to people's ideas. And then just to briefly run you through, there are some resources specifically on creative data collection tools or participatory methods. And there's also some information on from NPC on understanding your impact, as well as inspiring impact on understanding different data levels that might help you with you know, just sort of figuring out what kind of data you want to collect. So I'm happy to take some questions now, or otherwise, if there are none right now, I would hand you over to Emma and Sam to talk about SELFA. Great.
Do you want to hand over to us? Shall we?
Yeah,
Shall we
great.
go if there's no questions?
Go ahead.
Okay, lovely, super. Okay, so my name's Emma. I'm from a children's charity called Selfa, based in Skipton in North Yorkshire, and my colleague Sam's here today as well. What we'll do is we have a little presentation. I'm going to try and share my screen, so wish me luck. So we do have one here, and can you see this? Yeah. Let's see. I'll just start my presentation from the beginning. One sec. It's taking a minute. So basically, we're a children's charity based in Skipton in North Yorkshire. We're quite small, so our income expenditure is around about £250,000 a year. So we're not massive. Let's see. Can you see my slideshow now?
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely, super duper. Okay, so we're just going to talk a little bit about our charity, give you a little bit of background, and then we will go on to talk about just different things that we do at Selfa. We're not experts in the area, we just go with it, but I'll just tell you a little bit of background about our charity. So our vision is a community where vulnerable, disadvantaged and disabled children and young people experience happiness and belong. So we have our values there as well, and our mission as well is to support those people through enriching experiences. So we run a range of health and well-being projects, mostly after school, evenings, weekends. We had been doing trips and workshops and stuff like that. We've run stuff online during lockdown, which I'll tell you a little bit about. What we do is obviously all those different activities are aimed to sort of like reach a number of social objectives that we have, and since we've done this list, we've added another couple to it. But really, we want to encourage independence, support positive relationships, both between peers and with respected adults. We want to build self-esteem in young people and give them a sense of belonging as well, and for them to advocate those wishes for themselves, really. So we have a number of different business objectives that we do to get there, really, we work with a really good staff and trustee board to have those kind of things happen with us. So really what we want to talk about today is the data collection tools that we use at Selfa. I'll talk with a little bit of things that we do and things that we use, and I'll get Sam to chip in on these. I'd say that one thing to note is that we don't actually have any particular funding or anyone specific in post to do this. Sam does it as part of her role. This is a new sort of thing she's taken on recently, which is fab, but we've always done it. I think data collection, monitoring, evaluation is now a thread that runs through Selfa. I said we've always done it, probably for the last 4 years we've done it. We've been going about 13. Before that, things were a little bit sketchy, but I think that the key thing to remember is we don't actually have anybody specific or any specific money to do this. We do this as part of what we do anyway, and it can be hard to get that going at the start, but once we've had it in place, it actually saves us time, which I'm sure Sam will go on to talk about. But just to give you a little bit of background, I'll let Sam have a little chat about the Selfa Passport, and then we'll go on to observations. We'll talk about the different kinds of case studies we do, both individual and thematic. We'll talk about our annual survey and how we get people to engage in that, because I'd say, although that isn't that a survey isn't very creative, how we get people to actually fill it in is. And then we'll talk about just some of the quantitative data we use from Salesforce. Again, not terribly innovative, but really important in what we do. So Sam, do you want to just give a bit of background then on the passport?
Yeah, so this is a Selfa Passport, as you can see on the pictures, and each child that comes to our term time after school clubs has their own Selfa Passport, and it's a booklet to document their journey through Selfa, and it's all to do with our social objectives. So there's different areas in it. It's all broken down into sections. It's really child friendly, so they can do about themselves, about the family, how the life is at the minute. And then it's broken down, so the independence page with I can do it, and they document all the things they do by themselves, and then they get a star for each time they do it, and we tried to get them to do it 3 times so we can see an improvement and progress. So there's lots of things like that. So simple things like order a drink and snack at a cafe on my own. So I can document that they've done that and it's something that they've achieved themselves. People around me is all about building positive relationships. And then we have Marvelous Me about building self-esteem. And then we have Me and My World, so how we get involved with the community and things around us. But it's really good because the kids really engage with it and they like filling it in at the end of the session, so they take ownership for it. And it's just a nice way to round off the session at the end, and they can see then at the end of the year what they've achieved. And in the back there's lots of ideas that we've put in, or they can come up with their own ideas. So it's just a good booklet really that is their journey through SELFA and shows all their achievements.
Yeah, and I think again that's a really good tool because that can give us some real, you know, like we get lots of quotes and things from the children and young people from these as well, and use these as part of our annual report and reports to funders, really just pulling different things out. But it's a really useful tool. We're trying to move towards more peer evaluation of each other and things like that. So we don't use the passports as much as we did in the early days, but they're still there. And I think it's we work with a range of children who have, you know, are vulnerable, disadvantaged, disabled, children who maybe are profound and multiple disabilities, right through to children who maybe have emotional and behavioural needs. So we, you know, we have to make sure that we have enough data collection tools that and different ways that children and young people can take the lead and engage in monitoring and evaluation themselves. The next thing is observations. Do you want to just touch on this, Sam? Because this is quite a key part of what we do, isn't it?
Yeah, so during each session, whether it's after school or holiday session, we try and do 3 to 5 observations. So we have a list of 30 children to cover over the term, and we observe them every other week. So we fill in, it's on our Salesforce, we have an online observation form, and again, it's all to do with the social objectives, any differences we see within the children, and what's changed from them from previous sessions, or anything that stands out for that child that's made a difference, really. But all staff do it, so it have different views from different staff. It's not just one member of staff that completes them, so it's interesting to look back on the observations and see what progress they've made.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we've really found, so whenever we started doing the observations, and I think this is the kind of thing, we'll also include some data now from peer observations as well. So if children and young people have noticed things, you know, like if Sam does circle time at the end of some of the sessions, so if the children and young people are observing things in their peers, we'll put those in the observations as well, so we're including that as well. But I think also one thing that it did show us was for an organisation as a whole, whenever we started doing this, we were doing lots towards children becoming more independent, but actually our social objective of children and young people growing in self-esteem, we weren't observing a lot of that. So we then looked at the activities that we were doing and specifically looked at activities that we could bring in that would promote self-esteem and grow that within the children and young people, and ask them sort of like what kind of things would help them with that as well, obviously in a very sort of collaborative way again. So thanks for that, Sam. Case studies, we do quite a lot of case studies on children and young people. Really, again, that's the storytelling, and we'll do those individual, so I'll show you a couple of those in a minute that we do, and we're really, you know, I think this is probably the most powerful way that we can tool for data collection is telling a story. I really do. I think of all the conferences I've been to and all the reports I've read, and the things that really stick out are how things made a difference in the life of an individual, really. So we do a number of case studies, and we'll just pick up on people. We'll ask parents, sometimes we have parents who'll write them for us. We also try and include the children and young people in their own case storytelling as well, especially our older teenagers in their own story. We also do thematic case studies as well. So for example, we'll look at a particular, like we've looked at food poverty and obesity over the summer. That was a one that we looked at that was particularly prevalent over our summer holiday activities, because we ran face-to-face stuff targeted over the summer. We'll also look at different sort of like groups of individuals that we're working with, sort of like former refugee children. You know, we've looked at some of the online work we've done with their families as well. So looking at those different things can really, really be powerful in telling a story. And I think the story needs to have lots of different elements in it as well. It's about bringing that person to life, really. I think that's been real, so I'll touch on that a bit. Also said we do an annual survey, which is fairly boring and mundane, but we have an excellent engagement rate with that. And that gives us a lot of data that we use for funders and also for our annual report itself, but also to improve our own survey, our own service as well. And I think the thing is that the annual survey goes out directly from me as Chief Officer of the charity to parents, and I say, please, you know, so there's a request from me directly to fill in the survey and then explain why we need it. So, you know, basically, you know, we want to be able to get funding going forward and the importance of it and really focus that. And also, I think that people need to hear things in 3 different ways sometimes before it actually sticks. So, you know, we'll do it, like I'll send out the blanket invite to everybody, and then we'll put something on our social media, all our social media channels, particularly Facebook, because that's where parents engage, and then and professionals as well, and then I will make direct invitations to certain people. So I'll pick up the phone and say, or send an email and say, have you done our annual survey? Or if we're in a meeting, I'll say, have you done it? Can you do it, please? It's really important, and this is why. So again, not brain science, is it? But I think sometimes you just need to really keep pushing to get that information that you need. And then also I said we have qualitative data from Salesforce, which is really useful. And we set up Salesforce as our CRM about 2 years, was it 2 years ago, Sam, or 3? I can't remember. It was just before summer, which is our busiest time, which probably wasn't the best time to do it, but we did it. And that's been really, really useful for us, because we're able to just go in and get data straight away on certain themes, and then and be able to identify things and then back that up with obviously a lot of the software tools that we use. So that's what we do at SELFA. Hopefully that you find that interesting. And if you want to find out any more about what we do, have a look at our website. Just Google SELFA. I think we're the first thing that comes up, and you can see on our website we do have our monitoring and evaluation toolkit is on there, our theory of change, all bits. So, you know, you might be sometimes it's easy to talk about the theory behind all this, but it's quite useful to see it in practice. So that's it. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff you do in the groups? I'll just sort of like, obviously I said that what we do, our data collection is a thread that runs through everything that we do. And we will, so basically at the beginning of each term and at the end of each term, we, or the beginning of like the holidays, the end of the holidays, we have specific sessions as well as the stuff we do throughout. So do you want to just talk about that, Sam?
Yeah, so at the start of, like Emma said, at the start of the term, when you get the children together and get their views and ideas, we did start doing it through focus group based, but then realised it needed to be more child friendly and it needed to be more game focused, just so they engaged and they were more interactive with the children. And then it meant they also were sitting down feeling like they were doing work. It was more of an actual activity for them. And we got the information without realising. So there's a couple here of what we've used. We've used the beanbag activity, which is really good. So the idea is each child has a beanbag, and there's 4 hoops, one that says yes, one that says sometimes, I don't know, or no, never. And we read out some statements, again, to do with our objectives. So for example, at the end, to evaluate the programme, we'd ask, do you feel more like you have more independence? And they'd go and put their beanbag in whichever hoop. And then we just do a tally chart and record. So it's a really simple way of doing it. It doesn't take up much time, but the children feel like they're inputting, they're having the voice, and they're obviously, it's really helpful for us to know that. So that was a good way of doing it, and the children seem to engage really well. For the younger ones, we did a game of corners. So instead of putting the headings in hoops, we'd put them in corners like the typical corners game. and we'd get them all to stand in the middle of the hall and shout out a statement, and they'd disperse to whichever one. But that one worked quite well because they didn't seem to want to just copy what the friends did. They did it individually, so it's good to get a really good individual insight. And you could make specific comments on specific children if you wanted to note what individual children had made improvements with. So that was a good way of doing it. The next one which we've used is the 3 hearts and a wish. So we do a specific after school club called Community Champs, and that's all about how the children can get involved with the local community. So at the start of the session, the programme, we wanted to know what they love about the community and what they'd do to change it. So we gave them all a sheet, and they'd do the love hearts about things they love about it, and then one wish how they could change it. But it was good because it's all around positive, so getting them to think about the positive changes that they can make. So it was really lovely to see their answers and how they wanted to help the community. So then it gave us ideas of how we could plan the sessions, but again, having their ideas and input from it. So that was good.
Yeah, and I think actually, you know, by putting in the time and the resource to doing these things, it actually saves time, because the children and young people that we work with, they will need a lot of direction in the activities, but it's not that like we're planning an activity and trying to get them to engage. They're planning the activity that they want to engage in. So we do find that it's much better there, and it is. And sometimes they do have, you know, we do get unrealistic things. For example, with Community Champs, you know, there's lots of, you know, it's like what causes are you passionate about? You know, what do you want to do? And we get some really great ones as well. But you know, but one was like Save the Dolphins, wasn't it, or something like that, and they wanted, you know, and we were trying to sort of like work out things like that, and there was like about, you know, like Save the Hedgehogs was one as well, but Sam managed to get someone from the Hedgehog Sanctuary to come in and talk to the kids and do a session on that. So I think, you know, it's about making those kind of things which may be dismissed you know, by other adults in their life, actually, that, you know, yes, you're listened to, you're heard, and you can make a difference on the things that matter to you. So I think those have been some lovely examples of things that we've done. So just a couple there, and as I say, not brain science really either, but really, really effective, and can be done as part of a session or as a fun thing, and adults like these too as well.
Yeah, it's really informal, and it's good to give them, they get that level, they know the influence in the sessions then, and obviously we don't manipulate the answers, it's them choosing their own answers, so it's good insight.
And really good with children who have or maybe don't have any you know, couldn't fill in a form or anything like that, or wouldn't be able to understand using the pictures and everything like that. Sam, do you want to talk about Through Your Sticky Wall? This was a really lovely one that you did over summer, wasn't it?
Over summer we tried this out, and it ended up being a really good part of the session. So it was called the What Stuck With You Wall. And we had 9 different questions, so some of them on here. My biggest success, what would you change about today to make it better? And the idea was, at the end of the session, we put some sticky notes around the tables, and we asked the children to choose one question out of the 9 that's on a display on the wall. And we told them to choose one minimum sticky note. Some just did 1, some did up to 3. And they just chose the question and then wrote an answer down and went and stuck it on the wall. And it was good because they didn't feel pressured to do it. It was anonymous if they wanted it to be. Most children did write their names on it because they wanted to know what we felt that they've said. But yeah, it was obviously giving them the chance to tell us about any changes they want, what they've enjoyed the most. And we ended up getting some really good quotes without knowing. So one of the questions on the What Stuck With Me wall was, what will you tell your family when they ask, what did you do today? So we got some really lovely quotes around that, saying that they'd had the best time, they'd made new friends, and then we could approach that child and dig a bit deeper and get a bit more from it. So it ended up getting some really good qualitative data from that. Yeah.
Super, excellent, thanks Sam. So yeah, again, it's it isn't, you know, it's about what we do with the data when we collect it, which I'm just going to go on and talk about when I talk about measuring impact during lockdown. So at the end of March, we weren't able to do face-to-face services until I think it was the summer holidays, the beginning of the summer holidays. So we had 4 months there where we were delivering activities online. So there was a lot that we did during lockdown. And we wanted to be able to capture that. So like literally from the first week, after the first week of activities, we were like, right, how are we going to measure the impact of this? How are we going to collect data? And there were lots of different things that we did. Well, it was mostly Sam and Lucy who amazingly ran all our sessions for over 150 kids online every week, which was such a feat. But having a look, we put together a COVID-19 report, which I'm going to try and share with you. Bear with me. So is this, tell me if this, because I can't see whether you can see it, but let me have a look. So I'm just going to share. This is our, can you see that, everyone? Yeah, in the, yeah. So this is our report for COVID-19. So basically everything that we collected.
Sorry, we can't see it. We can still just see your slides. You might.
Okay, let me see. So 1 second. New share, isn't this it? And let me see. Bear with me. Where's it gone? This one, share. Is that there? Can you see it now?
Yeah, great.
Perfect, excellent. So basically it's so we collect all this data, and it's like, what do you do with it, really? And I think, so after reading this report, I sent it out to everybody, because I was like, just wanted to say, look what we've done during lockdown. This is great. And I think everybody needed a little bit of a boost. And to read something like this was a really good boost. And someone absolutely lovely sent me back this email, and she said, just had a quick scan through your report. I love how you've set it out, and the qualitative stuff is really impactful. She said, maybe next time you could do a more in-depth quant look at research, recruitment, implementation, satisfaction, fidelity, and completion, which is great. But I think if I'd thought of that before we did any of this, I wouldn't have done it at all, because I couldn't have done that. Do you know what I mean? We're a small charity. We don't have any. I can see you laughing there, Angela. But you know, I think this is the issue that we have with data collection and with impact reports. It's like that maybe would be the perfect way to do it, but we can't do it perfectly like that. We don't have the resource to do it, but that doesn't mean we're not going to do it at all. And I think a lot of people with very little resource think, I just can't do it. Why even bother? Because I couldn't do that kind of report. So basically, we put together this report, and it was basically get as many screenshots as you can. Obviously, all these we have permission and GDPR and everything like that, so we're following everything to the letter. But it's like, get screenshots of everything. Get parents to send you in photos of what the kids are doing. And you can see here's Chloe's been doing some baking at home. We had a baking challenge. That's one of the Zoom calls at the bottom there. We did a survey with parents as well, a Survey Monkey survey there. We got stories from our coordinator. So this is Lucy's done a story of what happened in the early weeks of lockdown, and about a poem she wrote that went viral about children and young people. Lilibeth's mum here, she did a case study for us, and there's her on her computer there. Just all these stories. We talked about how we did the Zoom calls and how we kept children safe. This is Sam's story really here. This is Sam dropping off one of the packs. Again, some of the online stuff that we did, just really our stories here. We dropped off activity packs each week for children and young people, so that they had, an activity to do in the Zoom calls. This was one around planting. They did like a little gardening one, which was amazing. Again, send us in your pictures. I love this picture here, this little girl here. I'm not sure whether you can all see it terribly well, but it just sort of encapsulates what it was like. I think we got some money over half term and had different like professionals running like parties online for us. So she was at the Disney Princess party, which is I just think that's brilliant. There she is with her tablet, and that really encapsulates what we did during lockdown. And again, another case study. We talked about, oh gosh, what am I doing here? Hold on. I'm not the best with technology. Hold on. Yeah, we did, more stories. And then this little bit here, having a weekly Zoom call helped me and that. But Sam, do you want to talk about how you got this data for the Zoom call?
Yeah, so throughout Zooming, we only used the free account, so we couldn't do the poll thing like we did at the start of this. So we had to be a bit more creative, and we just got the kids to do a thumbs up for each statement, or a thumbs in the middle, not sure, or a thumbs down. But it was quite good because they're all just sat at the screen like doing the thumbs, and they thought it was a really fun game. So it ended up with a really fun way of getting a bit of information out of them. And they enjoyed doing that. We just did it at the halfway on through lockdown in the Zoom calls, then at the end again. But it ended up giving us some really good little insight into what they've got out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, you don't even have to have the premium account, and you can put all the safeguarding checks in place. I think there's for everything like that, and you know, just making sure that you're following everything to the letter. But things don't have to cost money. It doesn't have to be a barrier to data collection at all. You can do it. We also just had a report from our psychotherapist, because obviously we ran a psychotherapy, we have a therapy side to Selfa, and she did a little report on what she'd done. And then we were a community support organisation during lockdown as well, so we did shopping and coordinated the shopping and medical, you know, prescriptions. We didn't do it ourselves, volunteers did it, but we linked up as that organisation and managed some grants or loans or something for the local authority. But yeah, but then we also, where's that one, and where I wanted to find the figures there, can't find them. We did have some figures anyway, maybe it's on the other one. Right, I'm going to try and share a new screen now. Hold on, new share, let's see, back to this one. Share. Right, so where did I get to? Here, so we were talking about this one, weren't we? So is that it? Can you see that slide now? Yeah, lovely, super. So again, that was what Sam had said about the weekly Zoom calls and how that had helped as well there. And then just finally, just talking about a few top tips about data collection from us. Again, we're not experts, we're just doing it as best we can. And I think whenever we did that report, it may seem like it's a whole load of different stories together, you know, and maybe it could have those different, what was it she said, maybe, you know, reach, recruitment, implementation, satisfaction, fidelity and completion. But I think I thought I just want to do a report. I want to tell our story. I want to tell our story about the first wave of COVID-19, as it seems like it's going to be now, and how things how we did things. And I think it was best to do that than not do it at all. So just 4 top tips really from a small charity bumbling along really, and what they are is, so when we collect data, we think, what impact is it going to have? We have started off with so many things that we've collected and maybe put quite a bit of resource and time into it, and then it hasn't worked, or it hasn't given us the data we wanted, and that's okay. Like I've just said here, it's okay to try new ways of data collection and it doesn't work, because sometimes getting it wrong is where we've learned the most. So give things a try, and if they don't work, move on and try something else. Don't give up, just keep going and try new things. That's what we've done. If you can't see the impact, don't do it. You know, I think it's good for us to challenge and say, why are we doing this? Why are we collecting this? And if we can't see why, don't do it. There's no point. And I think it's important to go back to funders who've asked us for stuff and said, why are you doing this? Why is this isn't important to us? Why is it important to you? And sometimes, you know, we've looked at trying to sort of do things in different ways. And I've been involved in a focus group with the National Lottery Community Fund about how they collect their data and how you know, simplifying their reporting, which has definitely got a lot better now. And you know, working with funders to be able to see that is really good, and to see that change. And I think then the last thing we put was just do it, just give it a go. It doesn't have to, they don't have to be loads of time and resource like we said, but just give things a go and see how it goes. And that's it from us. Okay. Super. Any questions? That's my email address. If anything from me or Sam, just send it through to us, or via Angela and Tonia, and I'm sure, you know, or if you want any of the resources, we're happy to share anything that we have that might be useful. And maybe whenever this is all over, you're more than welcome to come up to Skipton and visit us and see what we do in our groups. So that's us. Thank you. Stop sharing now. Yeah, we go.
Great. Thank you.